Welcome back to another video of HTML series. Today, we will talk about forms in HTML. To create a form element, we'll need a pair of form tags. There's an opening form tag and a closing /form tag. Depending on the user input that you need, there is an input element, and you can set the type attribute to whatever you need. Let's say we need some text from a user, like a first name. Within our form, there is a text box where we can enter user information. So, we should probably let the user know what we want them to type in. I will precede this input element with a label element. Let's say first name and a user can type in their first name. Now, it is considered good practice to fill out a for attribute within the label and set this to whatever you want. Let's say name. Within the associated input element, I will set the ID also equal to name. Whatever is within the for attribute, this does a couple of things. 1. If I click on this label, it will select my input box. It's also helpful for people using screen readers so that they can easily navigate your form. There is also a name attribute. When we submit this data, what sort of name do we want to give that data? Think of it like a variable. I will also name this name within the input element. There is a placeholder to display some default text to a user. By setting the placeholder attribute equal to some text, like first name, if I click within this input field and type something, that will get rid of my placeholder. Let's create an input field for a last name. We can simply copy this and make a few changes to it. So, copy both the label and the input element. Change first name to last name, change for till name, ID till name, and let's make the name attribute name as well. For the placeholder, how about last name? These labels and input elements will appear on the same line. To separate them and treat them as block level elements, I will add each of these pairs to their own div element. Perhaps I'll add a line break as well. Okay, now with forms, there are built-in buttons too. We will set the input type equal to reset. So, if I were to type in some text and click reset, that will reset whatever's within my form. And there is a submit button as well. I will set the type equal to submit. Currently, our data doesn't have any place to go to. So, if I were to click the submit button, this data is not going to go anywhere. If I need to send this data to a page, I will list that page within the action attribute of my opening form element. To accomplish this, we'll need the help of a dynamic programming language like PHP, for example. We won't focus on functionality in this video, but rather the structure of a form. So, if I need to send this to a PHP page, I will list that PHP page within the action attribute. There is also an associated method attribute. Two common values are get and post. Get is considered insecure. It appends your data to the URL of your web page. For example, if I set the method to get and type in some information and click submit, it will append my data to the end of my URL, adding a question mark and all of my data. If you need to submit some secure information like a password, do not use get. It is more suitable for things like search boxes, where a user needs to navigate your web page using a keyword. It's better to use post for submitting secure information. However, this won't do anything obvious because we don't have a server set up. There is a required Boolean attribute you can add. If somebody needs to submit some information, they are required to fill out any input elements that have this Boolean attribute of required. So, if I attempt to submit this without typing anything, a small pop-up box will appear saying please fill out this field. Now, let's quickly go through the next input elements. For password fields, you set the type equal to password. If somebody types in characters, they will be hidden. For password, set type to password. And for ID and name to pass. And remove the placeholder attribute. If you need to set a maximum size for your password, there is a max length attribute. Let's set this to maybe 8, so we can type in no more than 8 characters for a password. You can also add the required Boolean attribute. For an email element, set the type equal to email. In order to submit an email, we need an int character within our email. Otherwise, we cannot submit this information. Let's add a placeholder as well, such as fake@gmail.com. Also change the text in the label. For a telephone number, you're going to set the type equal to tel. Change all the things like ID name and type. I also have a placeholder for this field. If you need the user to type in a date, like a birth date, there is a type called date which includes an interactive calendar to select a date. Change all the things like ID name and type. You can select the date from this interactive calendar box. For a number input, the type should be set to number. Let's say the user is buying something from a store, and there are arrows where they can increase or decrease the quantity. Set type to number. And for ID and name to quantity. However, we should place some limits. They shouldn't be able to type in any number they want, like a -1 billion items. We can set the minimum, min, value to 0 and the maximum, max, value to 10. Additionally, we can set a default value, and in this case, I'll set it to 1. Next, we have radio buttons. With radio buttons, we can only select one option from a group. Let's say we want the user to select a title, such as HTML, CSS, or JS. I will create a pair of labels and input elements for each option. For example, we'll have an HTML option, a CSS option, and a JS option. I will set the input type to radio for each of these pairs. So we can select more than one option because these are all not within the same group. To set them all within the same group, we will have them all with the same matching name. Let's say the name will be rad. Therefore, we can only select one option now since they're all within the same group. That's the idea behind radio buttons, you can only select one. We will set an associated value for each option. For example, HTML for the first value, CSS for the second, and JS for the last one. I will precede each of these with a separate label. Let's say title, and I will set the for attribute equal to rad. Within each of these radio button labels, when I click on one of these labels, I also want to be able to select the corresponding radio button. So, I will set the for attribute equal to a unique ID. For example, HTML will have an ID of HTML. Repeat the same steps for the other options. When we click on these labels, we should be able to select our radio buttons. Nice! Next, we have to create a drop-down menu for country. For that, take label tag in the div tag. For drop-down menus, instead of a type attribute, we are going to use a pair of select tags. There's an opening select tag and a closing select tag. Within the select element, we list individual options. We will give the user 3 options from this drop-down menu. They can select country names such as China, France, Germany. I will give each of these options a value. Now we have a country option field where the user can select an option from the drop-down menu. Finally, the last input type I will explain in this video is the checkbox type. Let's say we have a subscribe button, and the user can go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Just set the type equal to checkbox for a checkbox. That's how you create an HTML form. There are still some more advanced input types we did not cover, but these are the basics. If you found this video helpful, please remember to smash that like button, leave a random comment down below, and subscribe if you'd like to become a fellow web content.